In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells, far over lonely mountain cold, stir bitter rivals, new and old. Subcommanders returns to Warhammer 3, and the forces of chaos are leading the charge. Princes of pleasure, pain, and plague have brought ruination to this realm, heralding an age of eternal war. The forces of order have not been idle, nor indecisive. The Empire, Dwarfs, Bretonnians, and Undead have dug in to staunch this new dark tide. Why vampire counts, you ask? Because they felt like playing it, I guess. But in truth, the Undead have more common cause with the living, the Dwarfs, Empire, and Bretonnians, than they do with demons from the ether. And they might just be the difference makers in this 4v4 for the fate of my ass. If you have not seen some commanders before, shame on you. You're missing out. There are a bunch of incredible ones on my channel already, but today there's a new one to add to the pile, and how it works is each and every one of the 8 living players in this lobby is tasked with controlling a specific element of a cohesive army whole. So, in the case of the Order races, Gojira and the Dwarfs of Barak Var are the infantry, Romulan Dog is the gunpowder and artillery for the Empire, the Fappening and Bretonnia are the Cav, and the Vampire Counts are the monsters and monstrous infantry. All 4 players on each side have to use communication, teamwork, and good old-fashioned micro to cover each other's weaknesses and make the entire army run like a well-oiled machine, or they will die, with the major caveat being each player has to take a few regular infantry units, otherwise there just won't be enough bodies on the field, and the compositions would be a bit whack from a viewer's perspective. We don't want a big single entity blob going on for half the battle. So, for the Alliance of Chaos, Scorpion controls the infantry of Khorne, Wicked commands the filthy Ratman artillery and war machines, Aerocrastic leads the monsters of Torox the Brass Bulls Brayherd, and your boy Indy Pride brings the party in his pants, Zazel, Prince of Damnation, and a host of cavalry and fast movers. Huge Jacked Man gearing up to reprise his role as Wolverine in Deadpool 3, sharpening those filthy claws, and a bunch of drugged up, sycophantic serpent snatchers ready to run down the flanks. The table has been set, now let us begin. And it's going to be kind of an awkward start for both teams, because it really isn't clear which side has the artillery advantage. Oftentimes you just gotta settle in to see if you're taking the pounding or if they are, or if it's kind of an even trade. And both armies have an element that really wants to get up close and personal, and an element of their army that kind of wants to sit back and shoot. So ironing out those differences, sending your troops where they will perform best, without leaving your teammates isolated, it's a big part of what makes this game mode, and team battles in general, so interesting. It can zap cannon on the receiving end of some day-ruining rocket volleys, and it's really not amazing in the counter battery department either. So almost immediately, Chaos will begin their advance because they feel like, hey, maybe not winning that artillery fight at the moment. Khorne will be first into the fray as expected, leading the charge with Chosen, the Hellforged host, and a Herald on his Heli Davidson, while Wicked and his Avalanche Mortars and Plague Claw catapults provide some support from above. Gotta watch that friendly fire though. It's all fun and games when Skaven slaves are concerned, but if you chunk Chosen, it's a different ballgame. You call names and it ain't just rapping. Bloodletters are getting pounded by those Hellblaster volley guns in the center, and the Undead are about to jump into the mix as well. On the west side, Torox the Brass Bull and the Minibus diving into the fray, engaging the Dwarf front line. Expect those low tier units to fall like wheat before the scythe, and in the center, Khorne's advance is already making headway. Evil Knievel spin cycles from the Blood Shrine, and a bunch of Coordinate Warriors and Minotaurs eager for the glory that comes from leading the van. Honestly, Blood God should be super happy with this start right now. Essentially has 2 of his own champions first into the breach, and they should be able to make a wide one for the rest of the army, and Slaanesh likes that. The Hellblaster volley gun for the Empire has been MVP so far, already taken down more than half the HP of those Hellforged hosts. But if I'm the Empire here, I think I want to get rid of those Avalanche Mortars, which are maybe the biggest threat on the Chaos side, at least for the moment. Of course, the Chosen and a lot of these elite Coordinate Warriors have already busted their way through, buzzsawed their way past the initial ranks of Spearmen into the second ranks of Miners, but important developments are brewing on the flanks. Slaanesh is linking up with the Beastmen, Heartseekers, Fiends, and the rest Light Cav, looking to go around, but the Forces of Order are super ready for it. Questing Knights, Slayers, Crypt Horrors, and whatever else might be hiding in the woods may force the Dark Prince to rethink any early aggression. Vlad is in the middle, Warp Flame and Ratlings burninating men-at-arms near the edges of the battlefield. Demonettes and Marauders are waiting in reserve as a second wave. There is a lot going on right now. Avalanche mortars continue to reap a terrible toll. Handgunners getting some really good volleys into the Chosen of Khorne, who have a full surround off on Boris Todbringer and his Griffin. Not really where they want to be, just exposing themselves to a lot of focus fire from the Free Company militia and the grenade launchers. We're getting some good shots into the infantry blobs. Demonettes now engaging. They will not get a full flank, but it's not going to matter because those claws should have no problem bisecting, bullying those poor poopy peasants. Behind it, Khorne Marauders, cultists are brawling in the middle, and they have not been dealt with yet. Maybe the biggest twist in Warhammer history is Skaven have mostly avoided exploding their allies, because I think they know what would happen if they were killing Khorne Chosen offhand. It's way too early to make any value judgments on how things are progressing thus far, although this should be interesting here. Blood Knights with the hammer and anvil. Khorne halberds holding back 4 or 5 units alone. Probably not going to last for too much longer now they've been charged in the rear. But as more and more lesser demons are summoned by cultists elsewhere, Azazel's making his way over to the left flank of Chaos, and he has a spell in his toolkit that could punish this pretty heavily. And he gets to friendly fire his Chaos God rival in Khorne at the same time. It's a win-win scenario, baby. Brutal slicing shards. Not overcast, though. Could have potentially one-shot everything in that radius. Invocation of Nahek will heal at least the undead troops in the mix, and perhaps Chaos will look to see a little bit of ground there because they haven't been able to push through thus far. Grail Guardians moving into the center to engage Demonettes, Warp Lightning, and a Doom Sphere from Ikit Claw, causing a little bit of mayhem and carnage. Dwarf Warriors pushed really far forward. Warp Flame and that Bloodletter summon should be able to handle them quite easily. These Minotaurs do not have shields, so if handguns get some good volleys into them, it could be pretty nasty. And a net of Ammontok on the Bloodbrute Behemoth Gorgon with Slayers nearby, and Gotrek as well. And now the Silver Bullets and the rest of this handgun line have turned their attention. Shem's Burning Gaze from the Light Wizard, and the Bloodbrute already down to half HP. Nice little wombo combo there. Getting rid of some of these expensive single entities early would be huge for the forces of order. You don't want to have to deal with that thing in a late game scenario with Boris Todbringer and his Griffin. Warp Flame getting some decent shots into the Crypt Horrors. Slaanesh Soul Grinder playing its hand, and now the Dark Prince's cavalry is beginning to make its move. Blood Knights evaporated after that slicing shards and an engagement with the Hellstriders. A couple shots from the Avalanche Mortar makes things pretty easy, and the Elite Vampire Cavalry not going to be able to make a big impact here. They'll crumble out without doing much of anything. It's been a cinematic, blood-soaked affair, and we're only about 4 minutes in. Artillery on both sides have definitely done their job. Avalanche Mortar might be damage value MVP across both armies, but we'll see if the Empire is able to shut it down before it's fired all of its ammo. Beastmen are backing up on this side. They've actually been beaten back by the Slayers and by that net of Ammontok combo, especially with Bretonnia sitting on the wings with Questing Knights and the Knights of the Lionhearted. Herald of Khorne getting his ass beat by the Reponse and Paladin combo. Demonettes crumbling out, but they did finish off some handguns or Free Company militia at least. Boris Todbringer made sure they were sent back screaming into the void, and Azazel is beginning to make some plays over on this side. After that slicing shards, he said he wants to taste melee combat, so ensuring some of these men-at-arms don't return to the mix, certainly not a bad idea. We'll see if that opens things up for Slaanesh, which is actually rotating its cavalry all the way from the Chaos right flank to the other side of the battlefield, and this is a play that not too many factions in the game can make. To make a rotation that quickly, it's actually going to put an immense amount of pressure on the forces of order, because now they have to respond with everything, and it might leave some gaps, some openings where there wouldn't have otherwise been. You can see all that pink massing on the horizon, and that's a flank overload that could expose the Empire in quite a damaging way if Reponse and her Knights don't respond in time. It looks like they're charging into the center for their share of the glory, but that's of course putting them in the cone of fire of those ridiculous Avalanche Mortars and Rattling Guns. Regrowth on Reponse to get her back into fighting shape. Slaanesh has gathered all their forces under Azazel, and they've made a big pick here. Grail Guardians, isolated and pinned in place by Narcissism, will allow that Soul Grinder to gorge upon their essence, while Razorgore Herd from Aerocrastic are massing on the flanks and waiting for a good opportunity to strike. Expect to see much of the mobility for the Chaos side dive into the Imperial rear and start trying to shut down the artillery and the ranged play. But Slaanesh isn't the only faction looking to play to their strengths. In the middle, Rapance and her knights have been completely stymied by yet another brass orb, and that suppressive fire from Ikit's rattling guns. And Vlad von Karstein is absolutely styling on some Khorne Chosen and showing them what a blood drinker truly looks like. Think we can call it for those Grail Guardians. Even if they weren't netted in place, they would not be able to escape from Slaaneshi Light Cav. And Sweet Sorrow is going to activate for the entire Chaos army, which is extremely powerful. That means the entire army has just been made fresh. Any fatigue debuffs they might have had are gone now. That is a potential huge swing, but it might be a necessary one for Chaos, because even though they've been winning plenty of these individual engagements, and they're just now about to expose the entire Order's flank and rear, it looks like the artillery for the Empire has done even more damage than the Avalanche mortars have, and in fact the backline for Chaos has kind of been swarmed by a tide of purple dwarf warriors from Barak Varn. Torax the Brass Bull and his Minotaurs are still alive. I have seen no evidence of the Gorgon still around. It might have been sniped out. Razorgore Herd are finally being committed, and it looks like a lot of these range troops for the Empire are about to be in serious trouble. Big time net of Amontok from the Light Wizard, but will only shut down the Slaaneshi aggression for the moment. They don't have enough range troops back here, or enough cavalry from Bretonnia to fully cover their exposed flank. Another Narcissism on the grenade launchers, and it's just a full-on terror rout. And this is a huge attack from the Dark Prince, and it might just be one that breaks the back of the forces of Order. Azazel's just straight up flexing his grace and beauty. He's an angel of death, and this is why playing the outskirts of a fight, particularly in 4v4s and team battles, can be so important if you're in control of the Cav. It can be tempting to commit all your fast movers heavily in the early game because you'll see your teammates getting blown up and you want to support them. But a lot of times it's best to wait and just see how things develop. Once those battle lines start breaking down and units start running out of ammo, a flank overload like this one from Slaanesh can be devastating, and it has carved the heart out of the Empire, who frankly did not get all the support they needed from Rapance and her knights, who were engaged elsewhere. Still though, balance of power is barely going to move because the Beastmen and Khorne are mostly dead, and Boris, the Mortis Engine, Gotrek, and Belagar, pretty much the majority of the important SCMs for the good guys, are still around. Vlad is straight up beaten on infantry over here, although he does need to move back towards the middle, as he's doing now, realizing that beating up on Skaven slaves and clan rats won't make that big an impact. Fiends and Azazel have isolated that Mortis Engine, and if they can cut that down, that would be a huge swing in Chaos's favor. Looks like Boris and Rapance gotta be pretty careful with all that Slaaneshi Cav circling around. Heartseekers, if they got a full surround off on any of these SCMs, would straight up butcher them. Mortis is able to escape because they got a bit of a cushion from that Necromancer on his corpse cart, some zombie summons occupying the Prince of Damnation's time. Fiends and Azazel don't really want to be fighting that, so if they're able to push through and get that Mortis Engine, that is ideally what they would like to see. Mortis has done a lot for the vampire counts thus far. It's been where it's needed pretty much every single time, and it's a big reason why Khorne just melted away in the middle after those initial engagements. But of course, whoever goes in first here is basically facing the wrath of 4 armies, 4 factions, so it's not surprising they're cut to pieces. Zombies, feeling the wrath of the Demon Blade, Azazel continuing to style, and he actually just got a sync kill on some of those undead troops, which did not work in Warhammer 2. You could not sync kill anything undead, which is a pretty nice touch in Warhammer 3. And it looks like the Soul Grinder causing some carnage in the rear, but with Gotrek, a Master Engineer, and a Flash Bomb slowing it down, realizes it's in a lot of peril, because Boris is almost back up to full. I think he might have gotten a regrowth sent his way from the Life Mage. That would be my guess. Invocation of the Heck, hitting the Mortis Engine. That should heal it up nicely. Rattling Guns exploding a corpse cart that was dueling a cultist. And now it looks like there's going to be a bit of a transition period, because all the forces are kind of resetting for the second wave of these engagements. Slaanesh is committing a lot to killing off that Mortis, and it looks like they might be able to just put it into crumbling territory. I don't think the Invocation of the Heck actually went through. Might have gotten canceled on Vlad if he recast it elsewhere, realizing the Mortis would die, or if he got knocked over. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Minotaurs with a huge hammer and anvil on the men-at-arms polearms, sandwiched between the remnants of the Khorne Chosen. It's a nightmare situation for any unit in Warhammer Fantasy. But the balance bar is slightly in favor of Order. We'll see if that remains true as we move into the back half of this battle. Been a brutal, torrid, blood-soaked affair thus far. So many kills, littering the battlefield everywhere. The third brass orb for Ikit, and a Scorch hitting in from the flank. Gonna get rid of some of these Dwarf Warriors, really nicely comboed, because the Vortex basically sucks everything in, prevents it from dodging, and then you hit it with the Wind spell. Rapunzel is still alive, Paladin is still alive, Life Mage is still alive, and Vlad and a lot of the single entities are moving over here to snipe out Torox the Brass Bull, who is escaping into the trees, but even though he's on his own turf, Boris Todbringer and the Griffin ensuring that the Brass Bull cannot escape. He actually has managed to squeegee his way through, but he does not have a ton of support out here. It'll be up to Slaanesh to ensure that the champion of Khorne survives, and sometimes Azazel isn't really feeling that. Chaos Gods are fickle though, and this time the Dark Prince does come to the aid of the Blood God. Acquiescence upgraded to lower the speed and melee defense of Boris, but he hit Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, and got a Von Hall's Danse Macabre from Vlad, which immediately counteracted all those debuffs and allowed him to take off back into the sky again. That was super good teamwork. They knew that a big duel was coming, and they know they need that Griffin moving into the late game. They popped everything on Boris to ensure he survived that fight, because that could have been really bad if he fell there and Azazel got some good attacks in on the flank. But the charge from Slaanesh might have given Torox just enough space to make good on his retreat. If he can rally with the forces of the Skaven, then they might be able to move back in and continue the carnage anew. Warp Lightning from Ikit Claw, pretty much gonna miss everything, but we know that their artillery and gunpowder troops have made a big impact on this battle. A lot of the deaths you see right now can be attributed to their firepower. Big fight brewing in the center. Vlad von Karstein surrounded by a Soul Grinder and Azazel. Rapunzel just broke off. She was pretty much murdered by the Goon Squad, and Torox the Brass Bull did a lot in that fight as well, but he's starting to drop low and he has no sources of healing, so he may not be around for too much longer if Boris decides to fight Torox mano a mano, especially if he can get some zombie summons in support, which is not what the Empire would typically like, right? Fighting side by side with a undead force, not ideal, but when Armageddon comes knocking and the end times are upon us, sometimes you gotta make some unsavory, unpalatable sacrifices, and thus far, I think the Vampire accounts have made a pretty big impact for the forces of Order, and are maybe the reason they're still in the game. But their Crypt Horrors are gone, their Mortis engine is gone, it crumbled out. Every single army on this battlefield right now completely in tatters, and the Rattling Guns unleashing with a huge firestorm towards Boris Todbringer. But when you're that far outside their fire arc, at the edge of their cone of fire, usually not going to do that much damage. It's when you get about halfway through or closer, that's when the Rattling Guns will pretty much delete you from full HP. Important engagement right here. We missed it, but the Racergore herd took the charge for all this remaining Slaaneshi Light Cav. They died, but for that sacrifice, the Crypt Horrors were destroyed, and those isolated monstrous infantry for the Vampire accounts are not going to be able to link up with the rest of the main army. Handful of Minotaurs remaining for Torox the Brass Bull, and the Blood Beast is still around, looking for a Paladin to slay. Wisely, the Bretonnian should back up. Life Mage, Paladin, I believe the only two remaining troops for Bretonnia, and it is mostly going to come down to the single entities for both sides. Now, though those Rattling Guns could quickly dispense... Oh my god. This is straight out of The Last Samurai. Charge directly into Gatling Guns, and they will not survive. They were out of ammo anyway. They can't do much in melee. Might as well throw them in and try to shut down the Rattlings. A Demon Blade and Temptator for Azazel. All of his self-buffs going off in a fight with Boris, who is dropping low. Remember that Legbiter, his Rune Fang, will give him regen, so as long as he's able to pull away, he should be able to get a bunch more health if he's not close to the cap, which I don't think he should be. He might be nearing it now, especially if there was a regrowth sent his way. Not entirely sure. Ikit Claw is dropping very low, and the Griffin might be able to finish him off, but double rattling attacks. Fiery Ring of Thori hitting them in the flank and trying to zone them out. Torox and Azazel have set their sights on the Life Mage, and I'm not sure she's gonna get triple killed from the Legendary Lords. Oh my god. That was absolutely brutal, dude. They straight up posed like the Chaos Avengers there. They each had their own unique attack animation to hit her from one side or the other. Boris Todbringer and his Griffin deleted from the game by those rattling guns. And that is a big loss for the armies of Order. They really wanted that Griffin and its leadership penalties moving into the late stages of this battle. Master Engineer has been entirely isolated as well. Acquiescence, an amazing single target debuff. Very cheap, very spammable. Activates that Lore of Slaanesh passive quite often. But Master Engineer surrounded by Razorgore Herd and two of those powerful SDM duelists will not be able to survive for long. Torox and the remnants of his Minotaurs moving back into the fray, presumably after routing, I would guess. Vlad is in the center alongside Gotrek and Belegar Ironhammer with a corpse cart. And that weird, awkward alliance could potentially spell serious issues for the forces of Chaos as they look to put the final nail in the coffin of these hated rivals. They've pretty much run out of infantry. There's a few Chaff Marauders remaining, but I think that might be it when you're talking about the Chaos side. I don't know how many more zombie summons that Corpse Cart and the Necromancer atop it will be able to send into the battlefield, but those could provide a really useful cushion for the single entities and prevent characters like Vlad from getting sniped out by these rattling guns or sniped out by Azazel and the Soul Grinder, who is chasing after the Master Engineer. He just shattered, but I think he really wants that kill regardless, and he's gonna get it. Poor Dawi just got straight dunked on. Rather ignoble end after all the work he put in. He had some nice flash bombs and sniping. Probably not crazy damage value, but you bring him for the range support, and he certainly provided tons of that. Now, Razorgore Herd are not a unit you want to see in the late game because they have a lot of AP, but more importantly, they have a ton of mass. And when they get a full surround off, it really makes it easy for a character like Azazel to swoop in from above and start dueling you without you being able to hit back. Potentially a game-changing play right there from Aerocrastic to have kept those Razorgore Herd alive. They're not a very durable unit, but they are a very useful one in late game scenarios when you've got Torox and Azazel, two amazing duelists, beating down on a corpse cart, which has Acquiescence sent its way, so it has no melee defense and no speed. Well, that is often going to be the result, and the single entities for Chaos are really putting in a ton of work here. Vlad, Belegar Ironhammer, and Gotrek are still alive, and Gotrek's really important because he is bonus versus large, and he could definitely take the whooping to that Soul Grinder or to Torox. But they've run out of chaff, they've run out of bodies and meat shields, and that means their single entities are now exposed to the rattling gun fire. And Gotrek was almost full HP, now down to half after a couple of volleys from those Gatling guns. Torox is still waiting on the wings, doesn't want to fully commit here, but Gotrek is isolated. Gotrek's Doom pop for the melee defense and the ward save. Really hard to kill him, but everything is diving in now. Soul Grinder is going after Vlad and straight up pushing him around, but the Von Karstein ring is activated. That's a 60% ward save on Vlad Von Karstein. Won't be dying anytime soon. Torox just routed off. Forces of Order are holding here, just barely, and the fact that Gotrek is unbreakable is extremely important. Him and Belegar are fighting back to back. It's super epic. Torox didn't rout, at least not yet. He's hanging on by a thread, so is everybody else. Rattling guns really shouldn't be firing from their max range. They should just move up and point blank into these SDMs. It would do way more damage. It would actually maybe delete some of these legendary lords. Torox is gone, and I think the Beastmen are going to route directly after him. So Belegar and Gotrek are going to be able to beat back the Cloven ones at the very least. Azazel is fighting Vlad in a 1v1. Acquiescence and Suppression kicking in here. Vlad has only 26 melee defense, back up to 50 now that it's worn off. And if it was just Azazel, maybe he'd have a chance. But the Demon Blade is kicking in to drop his leadership, which might send him into crumbling territory. And he has to deal with the half HP remaining on the Slaanesh Soul Grinder. So that is a lot of weapon strength and echolocation and screams of point blank range being sent directly into his noggin. Very unpleasant to deal with. And I don't think Vlad has the power to kill both these guys by himself. He really needs to link up with Belegar and Gotrek, whose weird bugged regen is kicking in. You can see all that green flashing in the background, but Vlad has fallen. And with that, army losses kicks in. Now Gotrek is unbreakable, so he will not rout, but he has, with 542 HP, a 0% chance of beating what remains on the field. Azazel going in for the kill, and with one final strike from behind, or maybe two, Gotrek will finally meet his doom, and that is going to be the Subcommanders battle over. Finn, Ultimo, it's done. And a really good one at that. Super back and forth, a lot of cool moments for both sides, and ultimately it came down to only a bit of HP on a handful of single entities. Slaanesh, controlled by me, did a lot in this game. Just gonna say that. Azazel, over 4,000 damage value. Heartseekers, over 3,000, multiple chevrons earned. And the Cav, I think the play to not engage on the Bretonian side, wait in reserve, and then swing all the way back over to the other side before they had a chance to really think about where they needed to commit their forces, really did make a big impact, because I just straight up gobbled up the Order back line, and that helped a lot. But I had a lot of help here too. Wicked did a great job controlling the rattling guns and the artillery. Aerocrastic did a ton with his Minotaurs and with Torox the Brass Bull, even though his Gorgon got deleted. I'd say his Razorgore Herd might have even been more MVP than anything else. See the damage value on a lot of Ikit's troops. I think the biggest issue for the forces of Order were the Bretonnian Knights and where they were committed. So I understand the desire to charge up the center, to get into those rattlings, to get into the Avalanche Mortars, shut down all the artillery, which was doing a ton of damage. But the issue is, if you enter the cone of fire of all that firepower, even if you have a lot of cav, you're going to get suppressed, right? That's going to be a 30% move slow, and then all the damage that comes with point-blank rattling gun volleys. And so losing the cav like that really hurt and made it a little bit easier for Slaanesh to move into the back line and start gobbling up all the handguns and artillery on that side. The frontliners for both sides got destroyed. Not surprising there. If you have a lot of infantry, you're going to be the fodder. You're going to be the thing that gets exploded by the artillery. But someone needs to do it. And in this instance, he who controls the cav controls the glory. And if they use it well, they can get a lot of kills and damage value preying on the troops once battle lines start breaking down.